All right, welcome to Equal Time Soccer. We are here with now Italian star Annie Williams over playing for Parma and Serie A, maybe our most frequent guest, our most appearances of any player of Minnesota soccer. First question, Annie, how Italian have you gotten? What's the most Italian thing about you? You've been crushing it in Italy.
That's a good question. How Italian am I? I think when
Let's
I
go.
talk, I've been using my hands so much more. So
Wait,
much more.
wait, does this mean I'm Italian? Because that's like I get shredded for using my hands on shows so much. This is great.
It must be. It must be.
Annie, I'm so glad that I was able to precursor that for you. Apologies for the dogs in the background. This is a bonus dog weekend. There are extra dogs in this joint, and that's Big Pounce. He's trying to be the big horse of the crew. Well, Annie, we were able to watch, some of your games are on Ada Football, which is a really cool. If people haven't heard of Ada Football, it's a really cool effort that got started by some women who realized just like broadcast and marketing rights weren't being utilized, so they just created an entity like to do it. And so Serie A is one of the leagues that they actually purchased the media rights for, or at least partially purchased. So got to watch some of your games. I tweeted this out. Saw you throw a sick elbow on a Juve player. That was great. You had some great one-on-one defending. You all ended up dropping that game, but you were up for much of it. Like really good run of play, super competitive with obviously one of the top teams, not just in Serie A, but in all of like women's football. And it was fun to see you out there. It looked like maybe you were running like a three back or you were playing on the outside of at least a system where those outside backs got up there, but you were playing on that back line on that left side. Talk about how this role in this club, is different from maybe other roles you've been asked to do in previous pro stops.
I think I don't know. Every year surprises me. Every new team surprises me. I'm not gonna lie. So I think that yeah, everywhere I come in and sometimes from week to week, what I'm doing is different. And
Right.
there's definitely like a learning curve and what I'm coming into, especially like yeah, just coming into different leagues, different countries, different styles of play.
Yeah.
And so I think that like over the 5 months that I've been here, I'm kind of like starting to really get comfortable in my role on the team
Mm-hmm.
and just like the flow of the game and the flow of the league. And um, the past couple games, I have been playing outside back, which I hadn't played since college. And so
Yep.
it's been kind of nice to get back there and um, help my team at left back.
And what you're describing kind of is brings up this dynamic of like the idea of a team signing you. So like, obviously Parma signs you because they've seen what you've done,
Mhm.
either most recently for them when you were in Sweden or your reps in Iceland, or maybe they watch college film. I have no idea how much shit these teams actually follow up or not. But what are those conversations? It's so what you're describing kind of is talking about this like this mix of what they signed you as versus what they're playing you as. So this idea of when you're in first communication with Parma, like when your agent, you're with False Nine Group, when
Mhm.
Josh or whoever, like so when someone is like, "Hey, Annie, Parma reached out, they're interested." Like, how much do you actually hear about how they want to use you or why they're interested or any of that stuff in sort of the lead up to actually going to a new team?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it varies from agency to agency.
Right.
Um, Definitely that for sure. So yeah, I'm with False Nine Group,
Mm-hmm.
Jack Gidney. Shout
Yeah.
out Jack.
Yeah.
Love him. He's great. And with this like specific like deal with Parma, he
Yeah.
was working with another Italian agent. His name is Mario. He's super awesome too. And for me, kind of like this opportunity was don't know how to say it, like, it was something that I knew about, like, I knew a good amount about, but
Right.
at the same time, there's stuff that you're not gonna know until you get there, until you get training, and for
Right.
me, sometimes it's a couple months before I realize things, but basically, I came in with the offer knowing that our owner, Kyle Kraus,
Yep.
was American and that
Mhm.
he really was investing in the women's game.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I just got some details about that, about kind of like resources, what we have, like what we're doing, and
Right.
obviously like what I had thought, okay, I'm coming in as a center back because that's what I have played
Yeah.
like my whole professional career. But obviously, you come in and you know that, oh, I'm not just going to come in this role from a different league, coming from a different style of play, and it's not just going to fit perfectly into my role on the next team.
Yeah. Are there, and that's kinda interesting, that was something I was gonna ask you about, the idea of playing in multiple spots, multiple leagues. You've had actually, like, a ton of different experiences at this point of, like, playing at different, different countries, different leagues, different levels in those leagues.
Mhm.
So, are there things about your game that have been strength sort of no matter what? When the role changes, the team changes, the league changes, maybe the style of play in the league
Mhm.
changes. Is there stuff about your game that's been sort of most foundational for you, that's been a consistent, core thing that you can always rely on, of like, well, okay, if they're asking me to do this, at least I can always do this. Is there stuff
Yeah.
that you just always fall back on, of I have my meat and potatoes, like, core set of stuff that I can bring to the game, and then if they're asking me to do a brand new thing, sure, I'll try
Mhm.
and figure it out. But what are those pieces that have translated the most across all the different leagues?
Yeah. I think that even since college, I kind of always knew that I guess even before college, I knew that my game, something that I could like really pride myself on and like this is my thing, was
Mhm.
just kind of my mentality of just like, okay, I'm gonna be playing against players who are like technically, tactically, in so many different ways better than me. But the thing that I have is that I can be the hardest worker.
Mhm.
So I think that definitely that has helped me kind of make up for ways that I am still learning how to like improve and that are I'm still learning to change from like team to team. And
Mhm.
then another thing is probably my 1v1 defending.
Mhm.
Of like, okay, from whatever league you go to, like you have to stop the ball from going in the net. Defense is yes, like, there are some adjustments that that you make going from different styles of play, of course, like,
Mhm.
defensively, tactically, it changes on, when to step, when to stay, all of those things, but for me, like, 1v1 defending has been something that it's, like, no-brainer, I don't have to think about, there aren't, like, major adjustments in my game that I need to make, like, obviously, I'm always improving in my 1v1 defending, and I love
Right.
going against, like, great attackers because I feel like I'm just, like, picking up different things of,
Mhm.
how to be better at that, but I think that that's the thing that's gotten me by when sometimes it's a harder adjustment on offense.
Right. I feel like your entire answer, by the way, was like the dream answer that a 65-year-old Minnesota dad would hope an athlete would give. You're like you're like, "I'm always gonna be the hardest worker. I wanna play good defense." You gave like you're like the you're like an American character in a sports movie, like having to go to
Yeah,
Europe. As soon as you started saying that, I'm like, I do believe what she's saying, but also this is the best. You're like, it's
yeah,
like what every European technical director wants to hear from like an American defender they're
of
signing. I
course.
love it.
Yeah, dad, share this with your kids, your high school kids. This is
Right,
it.
right. Tony, or my dad, when my dad is watching this and has a lot of thoughts about soccer, like knows nothing. What he would say is like, "Well, you got to be the hardest worker. You got to play good defense." Of course, yeah. I
Yeah.
love it
No,
so
my
much.
mom and dad have been saying that for day one. Fake it till you make it, but Like, you can
It
be the hardest worker always. That's what you can control. Control what you
it
can control, and so
it is true. And defense is, I mean, you're literally a defender, but defense in general, really in every sport, is about giving a shit. So it is
yeah.
kind of like you can
Exactly.
kind of control it, like you can.
Mhm,
And for whatever it's worth, statistically, your game has actually scaled really well across those leagues. I was really impressed to see, even just like really basic metrics,
mhm,
like your passing percentage, duels
mhm,
won, like total actions, like all of these metrics about just very general performance metrics have basically held steady, which I think actually shows a lot of growth and improvement, because someone might say, like, if those metrics are staying the same, there's not growth.
yeah,
But I think them staying the same is really impressive, because you have gone to harder and harder leagues. So like
mhm,
all of your games in Iceland, and then you go to a league like Sweden, which is
mhm,
probably arguably even tougher than Serie A, like in
mhm,
like maybe overall. And then you go to a place like Serie A and you're playing against the Romas, the Juves, the like all
mhm,
of these top teams, and those metrics have held. Does it feel, so if the numbers bear out that your game has scaled like at these different
mhm.
leagues, does it feel like that for you when you're on the field, just personally? Like when you get out there, is there a shock factor when you get to a new league of like, oh shit, they play like this is different? Or like, have you felt a level of sort of consistency in what it feels like when you're out there in terms of your confidence or your perception or all that stuff?
Yeah, I think there's so many different answers to that question for sure. Um, I think for me, my biggest thing is mental.
Hmm.
It's always gonna be, mental and just confidence, me working on my confidence on the field,
Hmm.
and I think that especially starting this season with Parma, that's been one of my biggest focuses,
Hmm.
is just, like, keeping my confidence and,
Hmm.
kind of just, like, staying focused and
Hmm.
kind of, like, even keeled throughout,
Right.
like, whatever I go through, whether I'm on the
Hmm.
pitch, um, like, in the game or whether I'm on the bench, because I
Hmm.
think I've gone through different types of adversity in my career where I've
Hmm.
been on the bench. I haven't been getting the minutes that I've wanted. And then all of a sudden I get thrown into an environment where I am getting the minutes that I want.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's kind of about keeping that mental consistency of like knowing that I can't necessarily change
Hmm.
who the coach picks to be on the starting 11, like any
Right.
given, like, yes, I can work hard in practice and
Hmm.
and do all those things, but at the end of the day, the decision isn't mine. And so
Yeah.
I feel like mentally me focusing on just kind of being even keeled, being consistent,
Hmm.
that kind of has been the thing that is holding my stats together.
Yeah.
Like, if that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
like if I'm on the field, if I'm feeling good, if I'm feeling confident in what I know I can do,
Right.
then I'm, completing passes, then I'm winning duels and stuff like that. So
Right.
if that answers the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's interesting because you like a lot of players who make the jump from college to pros, whether you're doing it in NWSL or overseas or whatever, you're going from being players who are willing and interested to go pro. Necessarily were usually pretty damn good in college. And so you're
Mhm,
almost always going from a place of kind of knowing what your role is, kind of having consistency, playing in the same system for 4 years, 5 years, whatever. And then you're automatically going into at least more uncertainty than you had at the college level, but you're
yeah.
also going into, I mean, I think people probably underestimate just how much like college coaches also control your life, like not just pro
Oh,
coaches, but
yeah.
you're, I frequently say like actually D1 head coaches are like basically have dictatorial like levels of control and influence on
Mhm,
people's lives. Like, so it's not like you don't deal with that in college, but the idea of the pros, like you get to a team and the GM signed you, but the coach now like doesn't want to play you or whatever. Like it's like, all
mhm,
right, sick. I guess I'm just here. Like, what do I control? Um,
yeah.
I'm curious too. there's probably about a half dozen or so players either from Minnesota or with Minnesota connections that play overseas. You know, you, Athena Kuhn, Alasia Lane, Rashida Beal, Hannah Cade, Mimi Iden, Maddie Smither, who I got to see when she was helping out South Dakota State. So
Oh, yeah.
I got to see her when she was in town. Morgan Turner. You know, there's only so
Mhm.
many, and so I'm curious how much you all talk to each other either about that dynamic, the idea of like controlling what you can control, like preparation, but even just in general, like I'm curious how much you all communicate with each other because I certainly like feel like I'm one of the only people following you as like a media type person, but I'm also curious, do you have like some random group chat? Obviously a lot of you were a longtime teammate with Maddie and you know certain players.
Mhm.
But how much do you all actually the biggest connection between all of you is probably the Icelandic league that a bunch of you have played in
Yeah.
Iceland. Um, but like Alasia went down and played with Saprissa.
Yeah.
So it's like these fun connections where obviously you started your sort of pro career down there. Do
Mhm.
you all bounce questions off of each other, or are there random times where you actually are in, similar places in Europe? Like how much communication do you all have with each other?
Yeah. So I would say my biggest communication is with Maggie.
Yeah.
I mean, we went to college together. She was my
Yeah.
roommate forever, one of my best friends ever. And so she's one that I definitely communicate with, and
Hmm.
we talk about all of those things, like all
Yeah.
of those mental things. Like she's always been a person for me where um, she helps keep me mentally strong in the mental game because it's nice to have um, someone to talk to who's going through the exact same thing.
Right.
Um,
Well, and
and
keep
yeah,
and if there's anyone on the field who deals with more mental bullshit than a field player, it's a keeper.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I say in communication with Mimi,
Uh-huh.
we have trained together quite a bit when we've both been home.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's been like nice to kind of like follow her career of we played together at the fire.
Yeah.
It was like a
Oh my
million years
god.
ago. We were teammates, yeah,
It
and
was so long ago.
yeah, it's just been, like, nice to see her, like, playing against her in the Summit League, and
Yeah.
then with her transfer and just kind of, like, following her professional career. It's been
Yeah.
nice to see, and honestly, I'm excited to see, like, what comes next for her. So
We're gonna have Mimi on for a show,
mhm.
for sure. She's back home because she and Hannah were both playing in the second division in Iceland.
Yeah.
Hannah helped win promotion. Her team win promotion over there, and I think is going to go back to Iceland. And then Mimi posted that highlight reel, which was so fun for me because that's the type of
Mhm.
stuff that I sort of end up sort of quasi creating when I just watch random film of you all and posting random clips. But she did, she posted her full highlight
Yeah.
reel, and so I was able to watch her just going at random defenders in the Iceland league. So it's super fun to just see her going
Mhm.
ham over there. Um, and I think, I'm curious too, the idea of you being in certain leagues and then that giving other teams in that league a chance to see you. So for instance, the idea of, okay, you're playing on Parma, maybe Parma is not at the top of the league, like Serie A. It's the first, fully professional season for
Yeah.
Serie A, but they've always had really good top teams like Juve, Roma, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, I'm curious when when you're talking to other players or your agents or whatever, the idea of being in Sweden so that other Swedish teams can see you, or being in Italy so other Italian teams can see you. Like how much does that dialogue come up with like other players on the team or coaches or friends? The idea of, well, if someone doesn't see me, they're never going to sign me, and so I have to be going to these tougher leagues, both to raise my game, but also so that new clubs are seeing me and knowing that I could be, someone that could help their team.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think that wherever you go, whatever league that you're in,
Hmm.
even, in college and back to high school, like,
Hmm.
if you're in league or you're in conference and you're playing and you are consistently doing well
Hmm.
and, um, and let's just say other teams have to kind of, like, plan their scout around you.
Right.
Not speaking from, like, personal experience, but just,
Oh,
like
no, we can say that. We can say that. They're
but
like,
just,
"Look
like,
out for that
knowledge of
left back."
the knowledge of the game in general of, like, okay, if you're consistently, like, a person to watch,
Yeah.
when the other team is prepping for their game,
Mhm.
word's gonna get out there.
Right.
If a team has to, like, avoid you to beat you or, like, offensively keep you from
Mhm.
getting the ball to beat you, then
Mhm.
I would say, like, word travels fast and so does respect. And I
Yeah.
think that, yeah, like, in the leagues that I've been in, it's like I've watched games when my team wasn't playing. Um,
Right.
I'll watch, like, ATA or however you say it,
Yeah.
football and just, like, watch the games and watch the different players, and so I think that word does travel fast, like, in the
Mhm.
league of, like, who's doing well, who's performing well,
Right.
but necessarily in season of unless you're looking to leave, go somewhere in the
Right.
transfer window, or you're having, like, the performance of your life,
Yeah.
then I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a conversation that's on the table.
Right. It's more just that it's an ongoing challenge of like, listen, you don't know who's watching, like who's watching this game, who's planning for us, whatever. Yeah. I love the idea of a random mid-tier Italian team breaking out the scouting report and being like, look out for that tall outside back. Look out for that yank. That yank. I'd love it if they like called you a yank or something. If there's some American nickname. Somehow I
Mhm.
have to believe if there was one, it would probably be offensive. So maybe I shouldn't hope for it. But I like let's maybe there's like a regular one that they would give you. I don't know. Speaking of Yanks, Parma is one of several clubs in Europe that's owned by an American. You mentioned earlier, like that was one of the things that jumped out at you. You were featured in that. I think it was on BBC, which is really fun
Mhm.
when they signed you. It's like, oh, American owned team like signs an American, and it was
Mhm.
tied in with obviously the first fully professional launch of Serie A Femenino, which is really cool. But does that show up? I mean, does the club being owned by an American, does it show up in any way day to day? Like, does it seem like I've noticed that they run a really solid English language social
Mhm.
media account, but I'm sort of assuming maybe that existed beforehand. But does it seem like being owned by an American shows up in any way in terms of like how they market or what or their merch or whatever? Or is it, there's an owner is an owner, but the whole staff is still the staff. But does it show up in any way?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for anybody else because I haven't been anywhere else,
Mm-hmm.
basically for a long enough period of time to, you know,
Right.
to know the difference, but, I mean, just to talk about Kyle Krause in general, I've been so impressed with him as an owner of Parma,
Mm-hmm.
because, of course, like, Parma is a historic club in Italy, like deep roots in Italian football and things like that. But as an owner, Mr. Kraus has really done a lot to invest in the women's side. And I was really surprised in how much we actually see his face and how much he like shows us that he's invested in us. Like the amount of games that he's been on the field during warm-ups, like greeted me by my name. Like that's something that I would never imagine going to a big club and getting that kind of like Midwestern welcome. And yeah, he just is really Parma ride or die. Like his he learns Italian, like he tries his Italian, he's reaching everybody. And it's not just
Right.
me because I'm American and I'm like, oh, like that's my guy. No, like he's like constantly like he's like that with everybody. And
Yeah.
so I think that for
What
me,
are
that's my experience with an American owner is yeah,
what
it's
are
great.
what are some ways specifically that shows up? It's I mean, we obviously love hearing about an owner who's actually just investing in the women's side. There's plenty of leagues overseas or wherever in the U.S. where there's both a men's and a women's team for a club at any level, and
Mhm.
you see the women just constantly underserved, like in that
Yeah.
model. It's actually almost a universal truth,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So what are some ways that shows up? Even just in comparison of
Mhm.
other places you've been, does it mean there's more resources for you as players, or better housing supports or meals, or what does that look like day to day?
Yeah. First thing that I would say is our stadium. If you've seen our stadium, it's amazing. I love it so much, and it's so nice to play in a venue like that, in an environment like that. Like, game day at Parma feels like professional game day of, like it feels like we're the main event on TV. Whether we have spectators or not, like,
Right.
it feels that way. The stadium, like, gives those vibes, and I think that we have so many people working for us that make days like game day, and honestly, like, the ins and outs of practice every day, they make
Hmm.
it feel, like, professional, of like, "Hey, this is your job. Don't worry about" this is gonna be small, but don't worry about washing your training clothes. It's set out in your locker, in your spot. You have everything that you need. If you need something else, you ask for it and you get it. And all you have to worry about is doing your job on the pitch. Like, we have a lot of people on our staff that I've never had a staff this big. Like, even in college, everybody has a job of doing something. Like, we have um
Right.
obviously, like, people on staff who help with recovery. We have coach, assistant coach, goalkeeper coach, obviously everyone who you would expect, like physios, doctors, like strength and
Yeah.
conditioning. People are like in charge of just like recovery, of like monitoring, like, okay, how well we're recovering throughout the day. And I think that investing in us in that way, of especially when we come to practice, like, our job is to be at practice, and to, to soak in everything, of like whether it's prepping for the next game or just like going over stuffs ourselves, giving us those resources,
Right.
really just help women's football in general. Like,
Yeah.
not just me in this time in this place, but women's football in general. Of something that I've been thinking for a long time is that, like, we deserve this. We deserve this. And so instead of just being like, wow, this is so nice, this is so great, like being at
Right.
Parma, like, I've really had the feeling of like, this is how it should be.
Hmm.
Like, they don't like give you everything you need, and they're not like, wow, this is great that you guys get all of this stuff. It's almost like, hey, this is what you deserve. Like, this is your job. We're just doing our jobs to make sure that you can do your job.
Right. Right. It's yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's that difference of, yes, they're giving us like all of this stuff feels really cool because we've
Yeah.
been at spots where it hasn't happened before,
Yeah.
but we're not getting it and then expected to like thank them 50 times a day because it's so
Yeah.
special that we're getting this. This should be the expectation of like, yeah,
Of course.
this should be, yeah, I love that mindset. Well, and I think, there's a lot of different internationals or non-Italians on your team
Mhm.
this year. I know like there's a stud like Swedish attacker.
Mhm.
There's a bunch of other sort of fun players when I watch the Juve game alone. But you have an Irish player. You have tons of.
Mhm.
We were chatting a bit before we started, but you, I believe, are the only American on the roster, and so I am very curious what the American questions you get from all of your teammates are. What are the top things you get asked by your teammates about American crap? What's the stuff they throw at you?
Mm, oh gosh, I would have to think. Honestly, I would say it's more me asking questions to them. Like, okay, yes, people are curious. Okay, like, we do this here. What's it like at home?
Uh huh.
But for me, sometimes I see, because I'm like in the Italian culture, like I live
Hmm.
here, I see like differences. And even if it's not like in Italian,
Uh huh.
um, even if it's just with other girls on my team from different countries,
Uh huh.
I'm always, like, curious. Like, I see someone do something that I've never seen or done before, and I'm like, "Oh, oh, like that's
What are we
interesting.
what are we talking about? Let's dive in. Annie, let's go. Let's get specifics. What are we talking
Okay.
about?
First thing that I have to talk about, burning question or burning topic is coffee. Coffee.
Mhm.
So, I mean, Italian coffee is great. It's amazing. Like,
Mhm.
it's just like short,
Mhm.
just espresso.
Espresso, yeah.
And so I'm always like, I want my American coffee sometimes. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
I'll drink some Italian coffee and I'll enjoy it. But sometimes I just really miss like a big fat latte.
Yeah.
And so that's something
And
kind of like,
it's not gettable?
I would say it's gettable at some places,
Okay.
for sure.
What
I
if
mean,
so what if are you just nervous to order it because they'd be like, "Oh, look at this pumpkin spice bitch trying to get her latte."
okay, well, at first, so we have lunch together as a team, every day after training,
Okay.
and, um, I love cappuccinos.
Yes.
So, after lunch, one day, I ordered a cappuccino, and I'm bringing my cappuccino out to, set at my lunch table to drink it, and I'm getting these funny looks from
Mhm.
some Italians, like, no one's, like, saying anything, but people are just, like, looking. I'm like, "What?" And then they say, like, "Nobody gets a cappuccino past lunch. That's just not a thing that you do. Like,
Right.
that's a breakfast coffee."
Right.
And so, kinda like, "Oh." And then I realized that, and not that I'm, like, consciously trying to change, but the next
Right.
time I order a macchiato,
Mm.
and then every time I go to, like, a coffee shop, it's, like, something small like that. So I'd
Mhm.
say, like, not that I'm scared to order it, but
Right.
I
Just
think
being
I missed that.
aware.
Yeah. Yeah.
What other stuff? Because your reaction when you started talking about this topic made me think there are 50 examples of this. We need at least one more.
Um, gosh. Okay. Um, okay, this is gonna be about food and drink again, but I just have
Okay,
to.
good. Yes.
Pasta.
Mhm.
Pasta. Italians
Mhm.
are, like, really big on pasta, and it's so good
I've
here.
heard
I can't.
I've heard that before. I've heard that before.
Yeah, but, some of my teammates, they never get sick of pasta.
Right.
They can eat it for lunch and dinner every day, every
Right.
day. For me, I've, like, asked my teammates, I'm like, "Do you do this, like, when you're at home too? When you cook for yourself? Like, do you cook pasta?" Like, "Yeah. What else would I cook? I love pasta." And so that's definitely, like, a just something that you notice because, I mean, we eat together every day,
Right.
and stuff like that, and I tell them about ranch and Chick-fil-A sauce. Nobody understands, but me, like, they don't know how good it is. I explain it to them, and they're like, that doesn't sound that good." But I'm telling
I
you,
t-
my
I
mom
tell
just
them
brought me a bottle of ranch and Laurie's seasoning when she came to visit me because I was like, "These are the things that I need to survive."
I tell them about ranch is going to be
Yeah,
the pull quote of this
please, please.
this episode. I love that so much. I also I love the idea of when you're in those situations, do you ever feel the confidence if you're in like a one-on-one or it's not you're insanely outnumbered by like 15 teammates at once?
Mhm.
Do you ever feel the confidence to tease them for being Italian stereotypes? The way they would tease you for like, okay, American, have fun with your Cool Ranch Doritos, like calm down. Do you when they're like, we love pasta, what else would we eat? Do you ever get to be like, you're being an Italian cartoon character right now. Like this is a joke Americans would make about Italians is that all they do is eat pasta and
Yeah.
you're making it real. Do you ever get to tease them that way or is it always them sort of being like look at this Midwestern American with her Lowry seasoning?
No, of course, it definitely goes both ways. Because I mean, whenever you're on a team with, like, new people and it's, like, a mix of cultures, like, you
Right.
really get to see how different, like,
Yeah.
daily life is. Like, even if it's just, like, little things that are super different, I mean, we all notice it, and so it's nice to kinda just, like, joke around about that kinda stuff of,
Is
like, there's no right or wrong way. We just
no. Who's
Everything
well, and
is
there's well, and as I sort of implied, there's plenty of shit that they could tease Americans about. So we
oh,
are
and
America is not on moral or cultural high ground here. But I am curious, who are your allies in those look at what they do in Italy situations? Are like you have an Irish teammate, you have I believe a Swedish teammate, you have I think you mentioned a Lithuanian teammate, a Portuguese teammate. So who are your natural allies in this situation? What's the geopolitical like alliances we see forming here?
hmm, I would
Or
say
or is there like some random Italian who like did college in the US or something? Like what's your support network geopolitically here?
hmm, like thinking of just about like American customs,
Right.
sometimes I'm kind of like out there on my own
Sure.
because there are so many different things that we do. Like we're on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
And so like I don't know, if you think about going from like anywhere in Europe, going from one
Mhm.
country to another country.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's gonna be extremely different. But at the same time, like growing up in a country that's close to other countries that
Yeah.
do something like or do things that are very different, it's like you kind of get exposed to that.
Right.
And for me, I mean, growing up in Minnesota,
Mhm.
we're close to Canada.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I've had Canadian friends and we do a lot of things like extremely similar.
Right.
And so kind of having the exposure, like of that, it just yeah,
Have they
it's
ever does teasing about the accent occur? Are you a Fargo character to them? Is that one of the conversations?
I would say we definitely talk about accents because we have quite a few people who, like,
Right.
obviously speak English as a first language and
Mhm.
quite a few other people who just speak English as, like, a second or third language. Um, so, yeah, we talk about just, like, kind of sounding different,
Mhm.
um, but I would say the biggest thing for me is my American accent on Italian,
Mhm.
because they have us in Italian classes, twice a week, and so it's great. I've been, like, learning my Italian and everything, but I still have that American accent, and
What's
it's
the
never
I mean,
going away.
so they're like, "All right, cool it, cowboy. Like, lean into this language, please."
Yeah, no, and I mean, it's so nice to have, like, a club be like, "Hey, you're in Italy, like, learn this language so it's easier for you."
Mhm.
It's so nice. But I do have trouble with my R's. My R's, they get me every time in, like, certain, like, clumps of, like, pronunciation. I mean, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but even in
Right.
class, I'm trying to read it and pronounce it, and I'm like, "I've never sounded more American in my life."
Who's who's in those classes with you? Who are the other players in the Italian classes?
So we have, like, different levels, and so I
Mhm.
have a lot of teammates who know Italian a lot better than I do. So I'm in like just like a base group of like beginning lessons of Italian, and then they have like the women's players and then some of the men's players as well.
Oh, I guess I didn't think about that. Are there any other there's no Americans on the Parma men's side, are there?
Um Not in the uh like
Senior team?
oldest, yeah,
Mhm.
but there is like one in the youth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little junior Yank. How old is he?
Yeah. I don't remember,
Just like a
maybe like
teenager
7.
in the academy or something?
Yeah, yeah. He's really good. He has a good resume. I met him when, he came to Parma. Yeah, but
Now I'm gonna look up this little kid. All right, cool. Uh, Apologies to everyone for the bonus dog yelping. Uh, and I think Annie, I'm also super curious. You've been in. Oh my God! Hey, there we go. Annie, you've
wow.
been in so many different countries, but and like you mentioned the Parma Stadium, and I see, you know, when I watch these games, you're playing in some places that are pretty cool, not just soccer wise, but also
Yeah.
just generally historic places, like lots of cool architecture, lots
Mhm.
of cool history. But what have some of those coolest away trips been for you? Not just in maybe not just in Italy, but you know, in general, it's you know, you've been in really different places. Like the idea of being in Iceland when we talked to you about going to that club that's like out on the island and you take the
Yeah.
hours long ferry ride. Um, being in Sweden, like being in Italy, these are just like really interesting places compared to each other, let alone compared to very beautiful Minnesota. So what have some of those cool away trips been
Um, to be
in
honest,
how many have you I guess how many have you you know and even just talk about in Italy.
yeah. Um, everywhere is really cool in
Hmm.
Italy. I would say it's a beauty that I don't know, I haven't experienced before. Like, and it's different kinds. We played in Genoa and right by the ocean, absolutely beautiful. The field is kind of like up a little bit, and so
Hmm.
as you're driving to the field, you get to see the coastline, and everything is just beautiful.
I love it. What's your road trip strategy? Do you have like a crew that you normally go out and hang with? Like, do you, you know, are some of you sort of just chill in the hotel people? Some of you are let's go walk around people. Some of you are let's rip it up, let's hit the club people. Like, what's your road trip strategy? Let's get into it.
Um, I would say, like, road trip wise,
Mhm.
it's strictly business.
Okay.
Strictly business. Everything that you need to play a good game, you
Mhm.
gotta do on the road,
Right.
because, like, having a home game advantage is so real. It's so real.
Hmm.
Um, and so, I mean, we're pretty, like, scheduled as far as that of not overly scheduled, but, I
Hmm.
mean, it's like we train in the morning, um, we leave that day, not the day of the
Hmm.
game, the day
Right.
that we train.
Right.
Um, we'll have dinner, like, if we wanna take a walk, we take a walk,
Hmm.
um, but, I mean, for me, I'm in bed, like, 9:30 if I can to get good sleep, for the game the next day, so
It's okay, Annie. We'll talk after we're done recording. You can tell me which clubs have been the best, like what the hot bars are. Don't worry, we'll get it after. Don't worry. I get it. You have to be
Yeah,
a
yeah,
pro.
for
Like
sure.
I get it. For the sake of obviously, there's millions of viewers. Like we need to be disciplined. Like I get it for sure.
Of
Um,
course.
I'm curious too. You mentioned like the difference in the road
Mhm.
versus home. I'm curious what that home schedule because I think people probably it's funny that I think we don't talk a ton about this, but the idea of going from being a college athlete to a pro athlete, like not having the college part is like
Yeah,
one of the biggest adjustments. The idea of
mhm,
just when you're a D1 college athlete, there's just no free time at all. Like you're
yeah,
just like swamped like crazy. And when you're a pro, like even if you're super invested in being a pro athlete, like there's
mhm,
only so much you can do with your body. Like you have to have times of recovery, you have to have these other
yeah,
things. So I'm curious, what does that day to day look like for you? You mentioned sort of what that road trip
mhm,
day, what a travel day might look like, but
yeah.
what do those day to days look like for you as a pro at Parma?
Yes, I just need 30 seconds. I realize my computer is gonna die, so I'm gonna grab my charger.
Okay. Miniature dog shot.
Okay,
All
sorry,
right,
that's the
let's
last one.
jump in. That's okay. I lifted my computer up and showed the small bonus dogs for viewers.
Perfect, great content. Um,
So talk about talk about that sort of day to day, what your run of the mill day is like in terms of what stuff is asked of you as just an athlete, a player, and then how you feel like the rest of your day.
Yeah, so we train in the morning. So I mean, wake up, eat a good breakfast.
What's the
Um,
what's the timeline? What time in the morning are we? Is it early stuff? Is it crazy early, or what's the arrival time?
I mean, nothing crazy early. We've had earlier a couple months ago, but
Hmm.
now since it's a little bit colder and you kind of have to wait for the sun,
Hmm.
um, we will have like a timeline of 10 or 10:30.
Okay.
Right now it's like 10:30. So we'll have
Hmm.
training. We'll have 2 times, 10:30 and 11.
Hmm.
So yeah, wake up, get to training. We have like pre-activation that we have to
Hmm.
do. Like we all get the pre-activation that we need, and so we'll be in the gym for at least 30 minutes getting ready for
Hmm.
training, and then after that, like 11 o'clock, that's the time that we start training on the pitch.
Hmm.
Um, and depending on the day, like obviously some trainings are short, some trainings are long. It depends on, you know, the games, when we have games, what we're preparing for, if we need recovery, all of those things. Um, and then after training, we have our lunch together, and then after lunch,
With the pastas and
yeah,
the of
the
course
pasta,
the ranch,
yeah,
etc.
yeah. Um, so yeah, we
Actually, actually, while we're there, what is the lunch setup? Let's get into it. What's the setup? You're at the team facility, or what's the vibe? Is it buffet
um
style? Is it just different menu each day? What's the vibe? Let's dive all the way into the meal.
So we eat at like a nearby restaurant every day. And I forgot to say this before, we have a team nutritionist. She's
Yes.
amazing. She kind of oversees everything that we need, makes sure that we get everything that we need. It's part of it is like a spread of like buffet of like always like salad, veggies,
Hmm.
things like that. And then
Hmm.
we like the first plate and second plate, they kinda change every day, and so we obviously will
Hmm.
have, like, a protein, like chicken, different type of meat, fish, those things.
Hmm.
Although there is pasta every day, we have rice and other things, rice, bread,
Hmm.
like, all of those good carbohydrates that we
Right.
definitely need to keep going.
Mhm.
And, like, sometimes we'll have, I don't know, things like soup, like, there's
Yeah.
a
You
variety of things that we could have on a day-to-day.
and then
Um,
are you pretty much done after lunch then, or is there other like meetings? Like what time are you sort of free and clear for like rest of the day?
I would say, because I mean, when we have, like, film analysis, we'll
Hmm.
have it before training.
Right.
So I'm usually done by 2,
Okay.
around 2. Yeah, depending on the day. Sometimes we have, like, a random event, or sometimes it's done earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, for me, I like to have something to do, but
Hmm.
I don't like to have something to do. And so it's nice to have something to do when I wanna do something,
Yes.
but it's also important to not have something to do when I feel like I need more rest and time to recover after,
Yeah.
like, hard training. Because,
Right.
I mean, if you think about it, everything that we do during our day is for those moments that
Yeah.
we're training, like
Right.
getting good sleep, eating the foods that we eat,
Right. So
just to body in
what are
different ways.
those things that you fill your day with that are both options but fully optional? What's your strategy for that then?
Um
What are we talking about?
So for me, when I was in Sweden, I started studying a little bit, not going back to college, but just I
Mhm.
started studying with the NASM program.
Hmm.
And so I
What's
have
that?
my
What's NASM?
uh oh my gosh, I forgot what the acronym stands for, but that's where I got my personal training
Oh
certification.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I did sports nutrition, and now I'm
Mhm.
working on performance, and then I have um, stretching and flexibility left. And so I
Oh
just
yeah.
kind of had an interest in those areas, and I wanted to learn more about
Right.
that for, like, my own personal gain, and also, I do like making workouts, and so I get like, sometimes I get a little business there of, like, making workouts and stuff like that,
Yeah.
so that's my thing. If I wanna fill my day, I'll do that.
Right.
Um, Otherwise, I do like to take my naps or, grab a coffee in the afternoon with
Hmm.
friends,
Just
or
not a cappuccino.
just not a cappuccino. I mean, if I wanted one, I would get one,
If there's no
I think.
witnesses.
If
If there's
there's
no
no
witnesses.
witnesses, exactly
Right.
that.
Your personal training thing, I'd completely forgotten about it, and now I don't want to tease it too directly, but that's going to come back around. Equal time content watchers, that will come back around. Andy being a personal trainer, I had forgotten about our DMs about that. That will come back around.
Yes.
I'm curious. The idea that you have so much, or at least a decent amount of like rest of the day time to do
Mhm.
whatever. I'm curious. Does that mean does that has that set up where you have a decent amount of time to choose as you wish? Has that made any of the places you've lived sort of um more like better than others, as there, because you have that time in the afternoons if you want to do exploring or you want to do stuff in the city or whatever? Which place has been the best for sort of that non-soccer time?
Definitely Parma.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I feel like this is a place to where if I don't wanna stay in my apartment,
Hmm.
then there are loads of things to do in the
Hmm.
city. Like, Parma's not the biggest city ever,
Right.
but it has, like, a nice, like, cultural city center of,
Hmm.
okay, you can go to shops, you can take a walk, there are museums,
Hmm.
um, things like that to just pass time, to go do fun activities,
Hmm.
and I mean, Italy is a small enough place to where if we do have a couple days off, then,
Hmm.
I can travel out of the city. When my family was here, we went to Rome, saw
Yeah.
Rome in a day, did stuff like that, and so, yeah, I've been really
I lo-
loving that.
the family visits have been some of the cutest content on the gram for sure. It's like, what is it? Both sisters. I
Mhm.
don't remember their names, but is it Tony and Cindy? Your parents were over there crushing it. What's
Yeah.
the when you get to play host? You're like, all right, I'm an Italian now. I'm showing you around. What's the vibe when you get to play host, Annie? When you get to be like, guys, I know how to take the train. Let's go take the train.
Yeah.
What's the vibe when you get to host the family overseas?
So my 2 sisters are definitely planners, like my mom as well,
Hmm.
and so we were all so excited for them to come and visit, and basically, they just told me, "Hey, I'm gonna check out these places, and this is what I wanna do." And
Hmm.
then I just kinda have to, like, be there and tag along and be like, if I have, like, bonus information of, "Okay, I've lived here and this is how you do it," then I give it, but I love them because they always come prepared of like, "Hey, I heard this was cool in Parma," or "I wanna visit this city," and
Hmm.
that's cool for me because this is my home, so sometimes I'm kind of like, "Ah, I could do that whenever,"
Right.
stuff like that, but stay tuned because Cindy and Tony are making a comeback this
Whoa.
spring.
Okay. Well, maybe you know what? We might have to get, I don't, Annie, I'm sure you consume all of the Equal Times content every minute of every day. We have started featuring moms more directly now. We do regularly check in and see what do the moms think. And so it might actually be a time to get Cindy her Equal Time premiere live from Italy. We may need to go live with Cindy and Tony. We support the dads too. We
Of
support the
course.
dads too. Obviously, Tony's been name dropped like 50 times in the show, so we support the dads. But that sounds like a good spring. We'll look forward to it. Last thing, Annie, you are a little bit of a trotter. You've been in multiple places, so we are going to finish this show with a country quiz about all the places you've been. It's only 3 questions. Don't worry, but we do have to throw this at you. Two of the questions, I'm also going to throw Minnesota in there just to give people some Minnesota clickbait. So we have 3 questions. This first one is, So we're considering Italy, Sweden, Costa Rica, Iceland, and Minnesota for this question.
Okay.
Try and rank from largest to smallest these countries plus Minnesota's GDP, so gross domestic product. It is the rough round number of the size of their economy. So think of it, the size of their economy. I know you're a business person. You're obviously an economics person, Annie. We know that. Try
Oh
and rank
no.
those. Italy, Sweden, Minnesota, Costa Rica, Iceland.
All right. We're gonna go with Italy,
Okay.
Costa Rica.
Okay.
I don't know. I feel like I'm just gonna throw Minnesota in there,
Mm-hmm.
Sweden, and then we're gonna finish with Iceland. But I do have a side note. I don't really have a rhyme or reason for doing that. It's just my guess.
You got a decent amount of that correct. Also, spoiler alert, I did list them in order, so I should have done better
Oh,
than that. So I didn't realize I did it until it happened. Italy
uh-huh.
was the top,
Okay.
and Minnesota was third, and Iceland is last. But you
Okay.
switched Costa Rica and Sweden. So Italy
Okay.
is 10th biggest GDP, Sweden is 25. If Minnesota were a country, it would be 44th. So congrats to our viewers. You get to learn that today. It would be just below Hong Kong, just above Colombia. So if people want to know about that, Costa Rica is 85th and Iceland is 109th.
Okay.
Next, we will have a soccer related question. So Minnesota will not be listed here. Of
Okay.
Italy, Iceland, Costa Rica, and Sweden, rank, where do you think they fall in terms of FIFA women's national team rankings? So of those four, from top to bottom, of how their national teams rank in FIFA.
All right. We're gonna go with Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, then we are going to go with Italy,
Okay.
then Iceland, then Costa Rica.
I feel like I almost should give it to you because Iceland and Italy are literally next to each other, but they are
Oh,
swapped. So Sweden is
okay.
third. Sweden's a
Mhm.
powerhouse. Iceland is 16 and Italy is 17. So actually, you know what? Maybe they played a friendly this morning and those rankings have switched.
They
And then
changed.
Costa Rica is 37th. But
Mhm.
honestly, CONCACAF nations, we love our CONCACAF nations. Jamaica just announced a new pro league. Like I'm all CONCACAF, baby. Let's do it. Let's
Wow.
get crazy. And I think Jamaica plays over the winter. I think they just started their league for whatever it's worth. Um, Last one, Minnesota is back included in this one, Annie. This one is land mass, so geographic size of Minnesota plus those four countries. Try and list them from largest to smallest.
Okay. We are gonna go Sweden,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Italy,
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Iceland, Costa Rica.
Boom!
Let's go!
Yeah! Nailed it. I love it.
College educated, baby.
This is an American degree. I crushed it. Sweden is just over 200,000 square miles. Italy is just over 116. Minnesota is just under 87. Iceland is just under 40, and Costa Rica is just under 20. I was surprised how much bigger Iceland was than Costa Rica. So we all
Okay.
learned a lot today. Um, Annie Williams, obviously one of our favorite guests. This is probably like her fifth show at this point. Playing over for Parma and Serie A. And Annie, so great to have you back. If folks want to follow the team, I know they have an English language channel. We'll tag in here, but otherwise, if folks want to try and follow the team, what is any advice you want to give if folks want to follow you playing over in Italy?
Um, let's see. We have a couple options.
Okay.
Yeah, you can follow the team,
Mm-hmm.
Twitter, Instagram. ATA Football
Mm-hmm.
is the subscription is really nice. You get
Yeah.
games in Serie A, and if you want to watch a game, they have games that are commentated in English.
Mm-hmm.
Which that's really nice. If you get the app Forza Football, then you can keep up with scores, live stats,
Ooh.
some of them.
Mhm.
at least. If I think of anything else, I'll let you know. But
I hadn't followed Forza Football yet, that's for
mhm.
sure. There is another your local, like, TV broadcaster does have an app, but
Okay.
it wasn't super clear to me how
Mhm.
to sign up for a subscription. So I almost did that, but at a football or ATA football is super clean and it's only
Mhm.
like it's like less than $50 a year. Like it's a super good
Yeah.
deal. And there's multiple leagues. I think they have Champions League games on there,
Mhm.
which is really fun. They have Serie A. They for some reason I thought I remember seeing the Bundesliga on there. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, tons
France,
of good stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, and they have a really good actually follow ATA football on Twitter too. They post a lot of highlights from games, like random
Mhm.
clips. So it's just kind of fun to stumble into like, oh yeah, wow, look at that goal, like look at that shot.
Yeah.
All right, Annie, thanks so much for joining us again, and good luck. I think you're on your break now, and then
Mhm.
you'll go back for the second half of the season, crushing it for Parma. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.